Hello. In this video lesson, we are going to talk about arrays within the context of C#. C# is one of the languages that relies upon static initialization of the array. In other words, once you declare the array, you can't really change the structure of the array. You can only change the data that's within the array. So you can't add or remove elements. So if we're going to talk about arrays, we're going to use an example that was given in the previous presentation of student grades. Now, imagine that I have a class, and right now it's a very small class. So I've got 3 students, and we each have one assignment. So all I really care about is the grade that the student got for the first assignment. So we'll call it student 0 grade, and maybe the student got a 100. And maybe my second student got a 85, and maybe my third student got a 92. So this is pretty easy to reason about. We don't have a lot of data that we need to keep in our heads, so it's very easy to understand what's going on. If I needed to get the average of the grades, well, all I would do is add them all together and divide by 3. So we could go double average is equal to student 0 grade plus student 1 grade plus student 2 grade divided by 3. And all we need to do now is write that out to the console. So we'll do a console.writeLine, and we'll say average is average, and I'm just going to do a console.readLine to make sure that I can see the actual output. So I have a typo right here, and so there we go. So now if I hit run, you'll see that the average is 92, and I misspelled average in here as well. So this is pretty easy to keep in mind and to reason about, but the difficulty that we're going to start running into is, what if I have to add another student? So I have another student that joins, and I give that student the assignment, and maybe they get a 73 because they rushed through it, they didn't quite get the material. Well, now my average logic is out of date. It's out of sync with what the actual data is. So now I would need to remember to go add student 3 grade and divide by 4. Now, what if I had a class of 120 students? Well, we would start running into a problem in that there'd be a lot of data to keep track of. We'd be open to a lot of different mistakes, such as, typing 22 when I meant student 23. We'd be in a situation where our data is very unmanageable and there's no way to really group it together. Luckily, the easy way to get around this is to use an array. So let's replace all of this, and we'll actually get rid of everything and just leave that console read line. And now let's declare an array of integer values, and we'll call them grades. And we can actually specify what the grades are when we first declare the data. So let's say we have a 95, a 98, a 72, a 64, a 100, a 105, because that student's really smart and got extra credit, and an 83. Now, I don't need to worry about student 0 versus student 1 versus student 2, because I can use the element to indicate which student I'm talking about. So I know, for example, that this would be the equivalent of student 0. This would be the equivalent of student 1, student 2, and so on and so on. Whenever I want to add a different student to my class, I can just add their value right at the end of this array, recompile and rerun my application. I don't need to worry about going through and creating a new variable. Likewise, creating our averages becomes a lot easier. So we can say total grade is equal to 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop over the grades array, and we're going to add each element together. So we're going to say 4, and we'll just say integer 0, or integer index is equal to 0, while index is less than grades dot. Now we could use length. We can also use get length. It really depends on what you're more comfortable with, but I'm just going to use length. we'll say we're going to have index increase by 1 on each iteration. So what this loop is doing is I'm saying at the beginning of the loop, we're going to create a new variable called index, and it's going to be set equal to 0. So index is going to be 0 the first time through. And then at the end of each loop, we are going to check to see whether index is less than grades.length. If it is, we're going to run through the loop again. Then, at the end of each loop, we're going to add 1 to that index. So the first time it's going to be 0, the next time it's going to be 1, the next time it's going to be 2, and so on, while the index is less than the length of the grades. So now we can just say total grade is equal to total grade plus grades index. So now our total grade data variable is going to be equal to the total grade that it was previously plus the current value of each element. Now to get the average, all I have to do now is say double average is equal to total grade divided by grades dot length. And I can just come down here and say console.writeLine average is average. And now if I run this, you'll see that I get my average of 88. And if I add a few more values here, and I run it again, you'll see that my average is different, but I didn't have to change any of my average logic. In fact, I could put this in its own method or its own function and call it completely independently. My data may change, but because it's all one group of data together, I don't have to change the behavior and the arithmetic that goes on to that data. So for example, I don't have to change the way that I get the average value out of an array.